It's Monday, January 4th, calling the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting to order. I will call roll, and I will tell all of you that my voice is, it's not good. I have terrible sinuses today. Commissioner Moore is absent. Commissioner Walton seems to be absent. Commissioner Hope? Here. Commissioner Matison's here. Commissioner Cook?
Here.
Commissioner Bevel?
Here.
Commissioner Elms?
Here.
All right, very good, thank you. So I apologize for my voice tonight. It's just fun. So I think we don't have anything on the agenda for the commission meeting other than covering what we're going to be talking about in the meeting.
That's right.
Okay.
You remember we canceled our work session for December.
Right.
It was a fairly light agenda to start with. One item was added that we weren't anticipating, which is our first item, but we'll go through it kind of like what we had done in the past, in the years past, where we'll just go over it here and then move into the regular meeting. So our first item is one that you've seen before. It is Legacy North on the north side of Lavaca Trail. Their request was to go from R40 to R20. You'll recall that our map incorrectly shows the R20 district, and in fact that never formally happened. We did take it to City Council. They were about ready to approve it, but with the request to convert the streets or have the streets be private streets, the mayor felt more comfortable having it go through a PUD zoning classification rather than a straight R20. So he asked that it be remanded back to the Planning and Zoning Commission to review it again, really for that change. Now with the PUD, there are a couple other elements that we have to address. So you have the ordinance with you, but I'll just go through it pretty quickly. So again, it is just a single-family residential development, 25 lots for homes, and then 5 open space lots, subject to the R20 district. Street layout and design will be per the plan that is in your packet, and then they will have to then follow with preliminary and final plat processes. Just reiterating the permitted uses and then identifying the R20 standards in the ordinance as well. Now, one thing that we do have to address is the open space. They are providing 11.3% of their overall area for open space. The PUD section of the Land Development Code does recommend 20%. So with this conversion to a PUD, we do have to address that. So that's what this is all about, is at least for the open space, is authorizing 11.3%. Again, no change to the plan that you've seen already. It's just codifying 11.3%.
Do we have any direction from council on the 11.3 versus 20?
They understood that it was going to be much less than the 20%.
Okay.
But the mayor was okay with that so that we can get to number 6,
okay.
Which is
Private
the
streets.
private streets. So basically just saying this development shall provide private streets within the neighborhood. So just to put that on paper.
Okay. How many streets?
Let me get back to the plan.
And then how many exits?
So right now they're showing just the single, but what, as part of our plat review, we did identify that they will have to have a second
That's what I thought.
exit. More than likely it'll be over on this side since they have the detention over here. It can be an emergency access only. That's fine, but they will have to provide a second exit.
What was the requirement for, or why is the second required?
Because otherwise it'd be considered a cul-de-sac. Even though it's not a traditional cul-de-sac, you just have the one way in and out, and we limit that to 10 when it's R20s or similar zoning.
10 homes?
10 homes, yeah. So with that, they have to have some type of secondary access. So the emergency only access would be fine. So emergency truck will be able to get in, and if that ends up being blocked, they have a second way to get back out.
Okay, so which homes do you think or lots would be affected?
I think they'll just put it right here or somewhere in this vicinity. So it won't affect any of the lots. It'll just be an easement.
It'll be like an emergency exit, what you see.
Yeah,
just
they'll build a
gate.
driveway and have
It'll
a gate.
actually take out some of the green space though, right?
They usually don't.
I mean, the green space on the ground, yes, but it'll be part of the open space lot, just as an easement.
Even though it's a road.
A fire lane.
Yeah, and I know we approved this when it went to council, but when you're looking at that, when you talk about open space, all the homes and all that back there, they have no place to go.
Except for their 20,000 square foot lot.
So that's a different,
I mean,
to her point,
except for their giant lot
if we
that
were
they're in.
approving this as we did, at just pure R20, then it fits all the requirements.
Right.
Right, so now it's just going back, the mayor had wanted it to be reconsidered as a planned unit development, which would require a change, a adjustment in the open space, allowing less open space than what would be in normal PUD, right? And then adding an emergency exit. That's really the only changes.
Yeah, well, realistically, that is a plat requirement, and so we're not even addressing the secondary
Okay.
exit. We're really just looking at
So it's just
the
that's-
zoning, and this layout is what was presented, and so this ends up being the plan attached as part of the PUD.
Why are the streets, why is it so important that the streets be private versus public? They want to have it gated.
Yeah, similar
That's
to
it?
what they did over here. These are private and gated streets.
Was that done as a PUD?
No.
Okay.
That one was approved quite a while ago, though.
Yeah, I mean,
Not very long ago, I think it was
Really?
2014.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I think there's just a handful of lots that are yet to be developed on.
are there
Well, my
other,
time.
are there other developments that have private streets that aren't a PUD?
Yeah. Yeah, we have that process. Actually, any subdivision can request to be private streets, gated streets. It's ultimately up to the city council to make that decision, yes or no. I guess for your information, all streets, whether public or private, have to be built to public street standards. There are some situations where a neighborhood will ask that it be taken back over by the city, and so that's why we require them to all be built to public street standards, so that if the city does accept them back, we know that they're to code, they meet our standard.
But changing this to PUD residential allows for I'm still don't understand why it came back.
The mayor wanted, rather than approving it as part of the plat, he wants it in a
Okay.
document,
So
a zoning
it's
document.
just really when it gets approved.
Yeah.
Were there other stipulations that the neighboring communities wanted to add, and maybe mayor and council wanted that to be part of the PUD?
So there are neighborhood agreements that they've made. So for example, there's going to be some fence repair or replacement, and then a minimum amount of trees planted here.
I'm sorry, it's not recording for some reason, so they're gonna have to get a camera and we're gonna have to maybe start over,
Oh, okay.
if you don't mind.
All right, so we're pausing. ordinance to allow for the private streets, they were okay with a significant reduction from that 20% down to the 11.3%. There were some agreements that were made between the developer and adjacent properties, neighborhoods. In the ordinance, in the whereas preamble section, we have identified that there are those agreements. We don't have them as an attachment, but they are at least referenced. They are private agreements that were made between the developer and those neighborhoods, and so we didn't feel it was appropriate to list out all of those agreements, more that we reference them and that we would expect that they are adhered to. And we would definitely find out one way or the other in the future based on the neighboring subdivisions coming back to us and saying, well, here's the agreement as was filed and binding, and they haven't.
So
met
they
those
actually have
agreements.
a document, an agreement?
My understanding is that there are documents signed and even filed, so they are binding documents.
Okay, but they're not, they won't be part of the documentation for this ordinance, is
No.
that? Okay. Would they be part of the city's record at all?
I know we have copies. I don't think they're the formalized copies, but we have copies of them. If we need to, we can go grab those, and we can pass them out. So
Can I make a suggestion that if this does get passed tonight by the commission, that we pass it along with a recommendation to city council, that they include that, should they pass it as well, that they include the copies of the signed agreement as part of the ordinance, even though I know it's referenced, but I think it would be good to have it attached.
Okay, we can do
So
that.
could the whereas section where it references those say as attached or something like that?
Yeah,
So
we
that
would be
it's
able
not
to
all
add
spelled out
that.
in the ordinance?
One
We'll
of the
probably work
concerns,
with-
legally speaking, in doing that is you don't want the city kind of refereeing a private agreement between two parties. Should one of the parties not meet the requirements, then the city would be in the middle of that, and they'd be technically in violation of the ordinance. The way the ordinance is drafted now, it references the existence of the letter. There are letters of intent between the developer and different HOA entities.
So those are private agreements?
Correct. And so the concern with attaching them as part of the ordinance is that the city would be essentially enforcing a private agreement, and generally the city wants to stay out of those.
And one
kind
way of
disputes.
looking at this isn't it really, we've already approved tangibly what is going to happen on that plot of land. We've already approved. It's just changing it from R20 to a PUDR designation. That's really
And making
it.
the streets private.
Making the streets private. So there's really not anything else different than what we've already approved, right? Okay.
Yes, when we boil it down, that's exactly right.
Okay.
So if the streets are private,
Is
who
there,
maintains?
there's gotta be an HOA, right?
Yes.
So
That's-
so letter of intents are great, but they're not, I mean, you're not gonna file a letter of intent. There's probably gonna be some kind of document that's filed of record with the county clerk, is that correct?
That's my understanding is that
Okay,
that's what
so,
they've done.
so the
They're-
will we be in legal trouble if we referenced, I mean, I'm assuming there'll be a volume and page on some kind of, whatever these, they keep talking about letter of intent, but ultimately it has to go to a contract, or to something that's binding, a letter of
I mean,
intent.
it's a contractual agreement, so
So is it gonna be filed?
it's not filed in the appraisal district or anything like that, or with
So
the land.
so it's not, there's not a blanket entitlement that's, so if I purchase property in that subdivision, there's a document that sets up the HOA, okay, and so I have to pay my fees.
Right.
But if the developer doesn't make good on his commitment, then the HOA's gotta be able to enforce that. So my thought, I mean, I would assume that there's some kind of, something gets filed, it's not just a letter of intent, because a letter of intent is non-binding.
They would have to basically enforce it contractually between the two parties.
Okay. I guess, to the point that you guys have raised, I mean, if it's not binding, then, I don't know, it seems to create some problems for me.
But how is that,
Well,
how is
they're-
it different than any other PUD that gets, would that be any different?
Well, so
We normally put things in the ordinance, we spell out things in the ordinance. PUD. Isn't that right, Jason?
Now, what we identify in our PUDs though are where it doesn't generally conform to or does not conform to one of our regulations, and there's an alternative as approved by the city.
Okay.
So it might be a setback alternative or number of lots on a cul-de-sac alternative, those types of things.
With no agreements between one neighborhood and the other that the city
Right.
wouldn't.
so what are the nature of the agreements?
Yeah,
Like,
so-
are they,
Fence repairs.
Yeah, this one, they have one to the north. This is their detention area, pond area with walking trails. They've identified increased fencing. I think they're going to replace some of the fencings or fix some of the fences, add some additional trees, which we don't have a requirement that they add any trees right there. And I don't know the other elements, but making sure that there's still that separation and privacy between the two neighborhoods. I think with the neighborhood down here on the south side of Lavaca, they were concerned about some of the drainage that happened with existing legacy, and so they've worked out some arrangements as far as maybe correcting some
But
of
is
what's
it-
already happened in the past.
is it fair to say these are one-time, like, they're gonna build
I
the
think
fence?
most of them
It's not a
are,
perpetual maintenance kind of thing?
I don't think there's
Okay.
perpetual maintenance. I think they are more
That makes more
one-time
sense.
situations.
Because,
The ordinance does say that whatever their agreements be, just with the understanding that, what is the wording that he used? Provided said performance of the covenants and those agreements does not expressly conflict with applicable law or this ordinance. So they will still have to be in compliance with the variations or the private road variation and the open space variation and all the other regular regulations for R20.
it just seems like we're leaving it a little vague on a letter of intent between, is it that they're still negotiating and we don't have the exact terms, or why couldn't we just put whatever the exact things are into the document?
Well,
Let's-
like, I can give you an example, like, if someone's gonna develop next door to your property, and the developer comes and he tells you, he's gonna put a fence, and, he'll put some trees here for you to make it nicer so that you will support his plan, then you just kind of, work things out together, but that's not always in the ordinance. What's in the ordinance are the
But-
variances that are requested to what is written, right? The variances to the land development code are always included in the ordinance, but those separate kind of issues between people aren't always in the ordinance. Is that correct?
Right.
Not always, but
Yeah, sometimes they can be.
They,
So in this case, it was going with R20. So there was no fence requirement, but they wanted some additional improvements to the fencing and some landscaping. But we can't require that with the R20 district. So they came into agreement with those. I suppose we can put some of those elements in, but I guess from our point of view, since they already have those letters of intent, those agreements in place, rather than go through and cherry pick out what we thought would be appropriate to add into the ordinance, since they had those binding agreements, we figured, well, they'll just deal with it on their own.
And they're binding agreements, is what you said.
What I've been told, well, at the meeting, the applicant had the copies, he gave copies to the council, and then each of the neighborhoods got up and basically reiterated, yes, we have an agreement. We've worked out between us
Yeah, the
that they'll
applicant,
do a few things, and we
Yeah,
provide
I-
support.
He was pretty detailed on some of those things, and there's actually a couple of recommendation letters from surrounding,
right.
homeowners.
thank you, homeowners associations that are for this, so.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, you will see the vast majority of all responses are in favor.
Rosewood Villas are all
Yeah.
in favor.
I think it was this
Homeowners
neighborhood,
association.
a neighborhood over here, and I even think with Remington, they have some type of arrangement there.
So,
Again, I would recommend you not include the specifics of those requirements in the letter of intent, because if you imagine the city's just a third party outside of that, by requiring that in the ordinance, you're kind of saying siding with one group, you need to stay neutral and not have the city be the enforcer of that private agreement.
Okay, I like it. Any more questions of this one? Okay.
So moving on to the next one. This one's a special use permit request for food packaging and manufacturing in Colleyville Industrial Park. It is this last building. I think Mr. Elms, he might be the only one that was here last time. Truly Foods came in a few years ago. They really didn't make or prepare any food. They just kind of combined ingredients to have some healthy snacks, I guess they were. Anyway, Truly Foods is now no longer there, and so this is a baking company. I always mess up their name, Cookies, Crusts, and Crumbs or something like that. But basically, cookies and other small desserts, so it'll be...
That name's not as quite as catchy, I don't think. And some miscellaneous to sundry.
And some other
If you look at their statement of planning objectives, she's already selling at Neiman Marcus and at Central Market, and I think with one of the airline companies, and so
Chip and Joy.
she's expanding. Yeah, that's right, Magnolia as well. So she's expanding. She wants to be in Colleyville, and so it'd be for this location. Baking is really the only thing as far as the manufacturing part, but then all the packaging and office and everything else.
What are the hours of operation?
We
7 to 3.
7 to 3?
Says Monday through Friday, 7 to 3.
Yeah.
And they would be relocating from Las Colinas?
Yes.
That's right. So we've already are working with her to have her set up her office space. This would allow her to do the baking as well.
So it's more than just packaging, it's baking as well?
That's right. Baking will be the only food preparation that there is, and then all the packaging and office and everything.
And nothing sold on site.
Right. It'll all be delivered and sold elsewhere.
So there's not going to be any parking issues or anything like that?
No,
Very easy.
it's just one space on the entire building, and there's plenty of parking for the site.
How many employees?
4.
Yeah, so between 7 and 3, Monday through Friday.
Save yourself trouble. There's, I mean, the only thing that comes to mind is smell. Anytime something's being cooked. Yeah, except for when it burns, but like right next to houses.
That's industrial.
It's in light manufacturing.
True.
It is-
But
it is
but
right
there's an
next to
SUP
houses.
for, I mean, if they had light bleed, you can be concerned about light bleed. So this is smell
Well,
bleed.
we have new lighting requirements.
Is that bad?
No, I live close enough, it's kind of funny you said that. I was thinking of it. I live close enough to Krispy Kreme donut where sometimes the wind blows a certain way. It's tough to live there. You know, so I could see that being a challenge if I lived there.
But no early morning deliveries, like, no.
No,
Not before
that should
7.
not.
No, 7 to 3.
They've identified just between 7 a.m. and 3 p.m., so it doesn't sound like they're doing the early morning baking like a donut shop would either, so. Or, you know, a bakery that gets there at 3
Man,
a.m.
I'm smelling fresh baked cookies in your bag.
Is there enough, what's it called, like the waste bins available?
So there, you can see that there's a double dumpster back
Dumpster,
there.
that's it.
That should be sufficient for everyone's needs. Now, I suppose if there's specialty waste requirements because it's food, then we'll have to privately contract with our trash provider to do that.
The only question I have with something like this too is because it does, when I read through it, she talks about, you know, wanting, you know, to expand and grow her business. And so when you approve something like this for how it's going to be used, and then she decides to go into, you know, for example, baking full meals and expand, does that have?
It's a change in use.
That's what I'm at, that's a change in use would have to come
That's
back
right.
in different, okay.
Based on what she has provided, we will deal with the use cookies, crust, and crumbs.
Cookies, crumbs, and crust, it's alphabetical.
I'm switching those last two. Cookies, crumbs, and crust. Yeah, so if she expands beyond what she's identified in this SUP,
Then-
Okay.
Okay,
then
then
we would
that's good.
ask for a revised.
Okay. Any more questions on this one?
The next and final is also a special use permit, but this is for warehouse and distribution facilities. Auto Recandy is a specialized auto parts store at this location, 6707. They have purchased this building just to the south of them, and they'll utilize a portion of that building for their storage, warehouse space, and the glass business is still going to remain in the building as well, up at the front. So this is to expand their business, which is primarily here, but it'll be their warehouse area in this building, which does require a special use permit. It is also zoned ML light manufacturing. Here's the regulations for the SUP, so no storage of parts or containers outside the building. That's really the only real regulation that we
The
identified.
SUP is required to allow for warehousing and light manufacturing?
It does.
What can you do by right if you can't warehouse the light
We
manufacturing?
talked about that with the city council because we just
Went through
finalized
that.
chapter 3. They were fine with, they wanted to keep it as an SUP.
Sounds good.
Now, we will mention that they are working with our Assistant City Manager, Mark Wood, who's also over Economic Development, for facade improvements. So there's a grant that the city has, and so they will be making some visual improvements to the building in the near future as well. So it looks like this back, maybe 25%, 30% will be for their storage area, and the rest will be the glass user. And this is what we have today, and they're looking at doing something like this in the future. Adding some landscaping, but definitely some facade improvements as well. But as far as the use is concerned, we don't have any issues with this, so we recommend approval.
Well, I think that, yeah, I think that's great, but I think, I'm glad that they are proposing to have facade improvements, because really, we need, anytime we have a SUP, I think we need to have
Yes.
that.
Yeah, so
They
that,
are in the middle of that process.
that was kind of my question, not as specific to what we're talking about here, but in general. So when facade improvements are discussed, is there some type of requirement that those actually get made if we approve something? Or can the owner then say, well, I've decided not to do that, and you approved it?
We can approve it subject to
Yeah, we
ABC.
can add that language.
Because I think, that whole section of businesses there, I mean, from a Colleyville aesthetically pleasing standpoint, they could all use some improvement in that section of buildings. So I would recommend we do that,
Right.
add that in, and that it's a requirement, and then it's good, sounds good to me.
I mean, if you recall, we did that with the
Right.
auto,
Joe Hudson?
no,
Across the street,
auto.
Collision
across the
repair.
street, okay.
Right.
All right.
Okay, so, any more questions on this? I think it's pretty straightforward. Those are the only 3 items we have on the agenda. We don't have any code sections to rewrite tonight.
That's why everybody showed up. They're like, oh, no code.
Yeah.
Well,
So, okay,
If I may, so right now, we don't have any items for our February meeting, and we don't anticipate that changing, so we may not have a meeting in February. So March might be the next time. We are looking at that date. It looks like it might fall within spring break, but if that's the case, we'll probably just work it out through email, how you'd like to handle the.
you can always move it to the end of February.
Move it up.
Right, so if we don't have this is actually good news for me, because I may not be at the February meeting for business purposes.
I think if we were to, I think I'd rather move it to the second meeting in March instead of moving it up.
Okay,
In February, or March, yes, March, sorry.
Yeah.
March.
So have our work session, normal meeting date also include our regular session.
when's the deadline for getting, for the applicants to get in their cases?
So we have one that's
applications?
currently in process, that we don't think that they'll be ready for February. That's why we're thinking March. We would have to have everything finalized within the first part of February. That'll give us time to send our notices, paper into surrounding property
So it's
owners.
just one applicant?
It looks
Or-
like
or-
one project right now,
Okay.
yes, for March.
Okay. Very good.
So I think I have some preliminary feedback that we'll just have the one meeting in March.
Yes.
Okay.
So no meeting in February at all?
Well, if that ends up working out, that we have the meeting in March, the item ready for March, we'll try and have our work session at the end of February.
So no meeting at this point on February 11th.
That's right.
Or when do you usually do the
So that would also
We're
mean
not
in
going
2
to
weeks
have
from
another-
tonight, we
yeah.
would not have it. 'Cause then
Okay,
we
Don't
would-
just
have to-
making sure, okay.
Right, so the pre-commission meeting that we would normally have, the work session, that we would normally have the third week.
The fourth
Fourth
Monday.
week of the month, pardon me, that
Okay.
it's not necessary at this point. Which is, okay?
Was that everything we needed? Okay.
Okay, any more questions? If not, we can adjourn and move on to the regular meeting.
You're there?
There's always one.
Next to me.
You never had to do Glen Heights.
Oh, I left my jacket in there.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I was actually there. I was the attorney for the
Getting the mayor.
Yes, the regular, the regular city attorney, she literally stopped process, told them that they could do it, and her leg broke. She broke her leg moving papers, and so I came in and I was their city attorney during that entire process, and then just as luck had it, she healed by the time it was done.
Do you want to stand up or what do you?
It was very trying. Did Whit keep you guys updated on that, or?
No, it's, I've got a project in Glen Heights.
Oh, you do?
That it's, and we're, so David Hall.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I think it's because he's a JD.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
I think he posted.
Oh, yeah. Who do you work with?
So, my company is Pick Dawson, so we're engineers.
Okay.
So we, which is weird, like, I've only done all this stuff, like, it's a different
test record work.
Yeah.
It recorded for like a few
My
seconds.
dad
Yeah.
used to work for Jacobs
Oh, yeah?
Engineering on the oil and gas side.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we just hired a couple of guys from Jacobs. So Jacobs Land
They
Development.
sold-
Yeah,
Yeah.
they sold LJA. Well,
And they sold the oil and gas side of it.
oh, did they?
Mhm.
So
They
the,
split.
the two guys that were like the lieutenants under the guy we hired is a bloody coup, and they went in unethical. They recruited everybody.
Hey.
Clients before they left,
Yeah.
while they were still getting paid by Jacobs.
Hi, Jim.
And then, so that all went.
I'm Claudia.
LJA was, or Jacobs was left with like misfitting pieces.
Oh, you did? Did you hear me say they should bring us some soup?
All the time. Perfect. So then that's when
Oh,
the selling
yeah.
happens. They sold the company by selling.
Oh, that's nice.
Sorry.
Oh,
What's the attorney's?
oh, you're gonna be.
Okay, okay. I figured I remembered it's around here somewhere.
And thank you for coming to Colleyville.
I was gonna, that we're good.
You know, I would say that David is very well-meaning, and he's very smart.
He is, he is.
Sometimes he does, when he knows he doesn't know it, he'll come to us. And they have a very good city attorney there, so.
Good.
Her leg is fixed.
You know all those folks?
You want mine?
Oh,
Good.
sure. Good thing you told me. I would have gone back at the wrong time otherwise.
Is the mayor locked in it? Oh, you don't.
Maybe, I don't know.
The mayor's locked in it.
If it's less than $25 or $50. Or at least the crumbs, right? The crumb part?
Exactly. That would work.
Yeah, he's not speaking, but I want to record.
I'll get professional.
Stop it. Stop it. I've got mine up and running.
I know, I think, don't want to take any pictures of me, please. Yeah, this video.
Okay, here we go.
Great.
If you would quit breaking it. You would quit breaking it. Fix it.
Good evening, everyone. We are calling to order the January 14th City of Colleyville Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Take roll. Commissioner Moore,
Here.
Commissioner Waltons.
Here.
Commissioner Holt.
Here.
Commissioner Mattison, I'm here. Commissioner Cook.
Here.
Commissioner Bevel.
Here.
Commissioner Elms.
Here.
Thank you. If I can ask all of you to stand for the invocation and remain standing afterwards for the Pledge of Allegiance. We seek blessings on the task before us. Bless our efforts with clear insight, our deliberations with wisdom, our work with clarity and accuracy, and our decisions with impartiality. In His name.
Amen. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag
of
the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I would like to invite any citizens, anyone that wishes to come forward that would like to discuss something regarding items that are not on the agenda for tonight. I don't have any cards for that, so, okay. Okay, moving on. Item number 2A, consideration of a zoning change from R40, single-family residential district, to R20, single-family residential district on Lot C, McEwing subdivision, and 1B02A, 1B2, 1B3, and 1B4, abstract 154 in the RH McEwing survey, located at 712-810, pardon me, Lavaca Trail, KZC 18-033.
Thank you, Commissioners. Ben Briner, Director of Community Development. I'll present this item for you tonight. This is one that you have seen in the past fairly recently for our Legacy North proposed development project. It is on the north side of Lavaca Trail, currently an undeveloped piece of property. If you'll remember, the request was to go from the R40 single-family residential district to the R20 single-family residential district. Our map currently shows the zoning as R20. However, we did find and verify that that was an error. It should have the R40 single-family residential district on it. They are proposing to subdivide the property for single-family residences. Same developer as the Legacy development to the south, on the south side of Lavaca Trail. This would be for 25 single-family residential lots and then 5 open space lots. It does meet our future land use map designation for residential use. And these are the minimum development regulations for the R20 district, which they do comply with. So this is just to reiterate that where the error happened in the end of 2006, you can see the subject property was zoned R40. There was a case that did go before Planning and Zoning Commission and Council. It included a change of zoning to go to the R20. That was not approved. It did not go forward past Planning and Zoning Commission, but there was a second element for a special use permit to allow for grazing animals. That did go all the way through, was approved. I think that's where the error was, where they, our GIS folks erroneously changed the zoning, even though the zoning did not follow suit with the SUP. For some reason, it's not moving forward, but we brought it through for approval. The Planning and Zoning Commission did recommend approval. That was at your October 22nd meeting. This did go to City Council at their second reading. There was a discussion about private streets and allowing private streets for this development. That typically is an approval as part of the plat process, but the mayor did ask that the zoning be changed, or he is recommending that it be changed to a plan unit development residential zoning district to then codify the private streets, primarily to codify private streets being allowed, private gated streets for this neighborhood. Here is the concept plan. You can see the 25 residential lots as well as the open space lots, 5 open space lots. This is designed to mimic and mirror what we have to the south. It is the same developer for both. This was an older plat exhibit. Again, they have not finalized the plat, but that will have to come before you at a later date. I do have drainage map as well as utility plan if there are any questions for that. So as part of the PUDR zoning, again, it's just to recognize the 25 lot subdivision. Per that plan that I just showed on your screens, they will have to follow with our preliminary plat and final plat processes. As far as permitted uses, it will be for single family residential. I should back up just a little bit. They will be subject to the R20 zoning district for development of this site. And again, reiterating what those minimum dimensional standards and setback standards are for the district. Two key elements that are identified deal with the open space and then the private streets. Most, or the standard open space requirement for our PUD zoning is 20%. They are providing 11.3% with their current design. Again, that design has not changed from the last you saw. The city council did express that they understood that it would be much less than the standard 20%, but the trade-off to codify the private streets, they felt comfortable with that 11.3% standard. And then private streets, again, the main purpose for this is just to put down on paper that private streets for this development would be allowed with the gated access. Just a picture. Again, we did send our notices out to surrounding property owners. Since this is the same item as before, we've just added to our responses that you saw last time. The majority are in favor, the vast majority. And as before, staff does continue to recommend approval. And then I've identified the previous actions. So you did recommend approval at your October 22nd meeting by unanimous 7-0 vote. And then at the last city council meeting, I believe this was on December 4th, they again remanded it back for your consideration to go through the plan unit development process. And with that, I can answer any other questions that you might have.
I think we had our questions, the few that we had addressed in the work session previously.
Great.
I believe so. Make sure I'm not speaking. Okay, all right, great. So if there are no more, thank you very much, Ben. If there are no more questions, I'd like to open the public hearing. Public hearing is open. And I'd like to invite anyone that does wish to come to speak forward on this item to do so now. And I do have 2 cards, one of which an individual would like to come forward to speak. Mr. Capps. And I'll just remind you to please state your name and address for the record.
Yes, hi, it's Michael Capps, 6116 Legacy Trail, Colleyville, Texas. I'm in the Legacy subdivision, which is just south of the subdivision being discussed, and previously had come when it was being discussed prior. And I'm here tonight to suggest, or hopefully you guys will look at approving this. I mean, it's a good plan. Hopefully it'll, join the 2 subdivisions, in like unity, give us a similar feel for the area. And I think the mayor, during his discussion, was concerned about not only, primarily the agreements with the subdivisions around. So the change to the PUD was more to ensure that the agreements that Mr. Makis has with the subdivisions that align with this new subdivision are in connection or in tied with the PUD versus just in general discussion. So hopefully you guys will consider approval and moving on to let them build the subdivisions. We have, the Legacy and the Legacy North down Lavaca Trail. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I have one more card for the Garretts. They do not wish to come forward to speak, but they wish to have their record of support recorded. I have no more cards, but I'd like to invite anyone that wishes to come forward to do so. If not, I'll close the public hearing. Public hearing is closed. Okay. If there are any questions or comments from the commission? No, we did discuss this at length in our pre-commission work session. I think some of the things that came out of that discussion was it was highlighted that the open space requirements that are normally recommended for PUDs of 20% is not being met. And we received direction from council that that is a requirement that they're comfortable waiving in exchange for the having this zoned as a PUD and having the streets be private, and also having a reference in the ordinance itself to the agreements between the private parties, the the communities, the surrounding community, and the developer. Anything else? I'm sorry, my voice, I've been sick. My voice is just going. Okay.
Well, to save you the trouble, I would make a motion that we approve KZC 18-033.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Okay. We have a motion to approve case number ZC 18-033. I would like to take the vote. Commissioner Moore?
Aye.
Commissioner Waltons?
Aye.
Commissioner Holt? Commissioner Mattison votes aye. Commissioner Cook?
Aye.
Commissioner Bevel?
Aye.
Commissioner Elms?
Aye.
It's approved unanimously. Thank you. Let's see. Moving on to our next, Moving on to our next item, item number 2B, consideration of a special use permit for food packaging and manufacturing on Lot 8R, Block 1 of the Colleyville Industrial Park located at 1904 Industrial Boulevard. This is case number ZC 18-036. Would you like to present this case?
Thank you. Good evening, Commission. It's a request for a special use permit for food packaging and manufacturing, 1904 Industrial Boulevard. The business is called Cookies, Crumbs, and Crust, and it's currently operating in Irving, and they wanted to expand their operations by relocating here to Colleyville. It does have 4 employees where they manufacture, package, and ship specialty cookies, which are currently sold in Chip and Joanna's Magnolia Table and the Silos Bakery, Neiman Marcus, and Central Market, to name a few places. And this is an aerial map showing the existing building. They will be locating in a space here. Here's a zoning map. The zoning for the property is light manufacturing, and then just to the east is the Rossdown subdivision. And the future land use shows this property to continue to be commercial, and it's also part of the Colleyville Boulevard corridor in our master plan. The SUP language, that this SUP shall apply only to the Exhibit B that's attached in your draft ordinance. The hours of operation for this business is 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. There is a minimum of 5 parking spaces required for this use, but this business only has 4 employees. And then that these SUP shall automatically expire upon the abandonment of the business, change in use, a change in ownership, or upon the expiration or termination of the certificate of occupancy. There was a business previously in this space that had a very similar SUP. The difference here is this business bakes their goods. The business before did not. And here's just an exhibit showing the floor plan of the space and what the outside of the space looks like. Staff did notify all the properties within 500 feet of this location per our requirements, and staff does recommend approval of this SUP.
Great, thank you. If the applicant's here, I'd like to invite you forward to, okay. If you can, I'll just remind you to please state your name and address for the public record, please.
My name is Jill Marks. I'm the owner of Cookies, Crumbs, and Crust.
Okay. All right. I don't have any particular questions for you, but if you'd like to, I don't know, add any additional information that we may not have.
I was listening in your meeting, so
okay.
You covered it, yeah.
Yeah, we did. We covered quite a bit. So.
I guess I have one question. It's kind of a silly question, but in your previous location, how close were you to residential area?
It's a 3-story office building.
Oh, okay.
So it's very close. We were, I took a picture of the marquee and exactly how small my kitchen is, and I've never had any problems.
Never had a complaint?
No, it's right off of O'Connor, right on the golf.
Do you mind going to the microphone so we can get your voice on the recording?
Does, oh.
So
Ask another question, hurry.
It's the same-
I'm sorry. I'm a little nervous.
Same question of, where was your business
Yes,
previously located?
yes.
And how close was it to
300
residential
Decker
area?
Drive, Suite 200. It's the second floor out of 3 floors. And the office building was at full occupancy. And we had the Dallas, Fort Worth Hospital Association on the far side. And it's, a lot of employees.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. No complaints from the residents?
Oh, no.
Okay, good.
No, and my oven is self-contained. It's cool to touch, and it's one oven. That's it. And, there's no exhaust, nothing like that.
I think it sounds like a great business and it'd be a great addition to Colleyville.
Thank you. Anything else?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
No. Okay. I'd like to open the public hearing. Public hearing is open. If anyone wishes to come forward to speak for or against this item, please do so now. I do not have any cards on this item. With no one coming forward, I'm going to close the public hearing. Sorry. Okay. Commissioners, any further discussion?
That's pretty straightforward.
It is very straightforward. Okay, very good. Okay, I would like to request a motion, please.
I'll make a motion to approve zoning case 18, oh, sorry, I got the wrong, yeah.
18036.
Oh, that's what I thought, I had the wrong one. Start over. I would like to make a motion to approve zoning case 18-036.
I'll second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to approve case number ZC 18-036. I will take the vote. Commissioner Moore?
Aye.
Commissioner Waltons?
Aye.
Commissioner Holt? Aye. Commissioner Mattison votes aye. Commissioner Cook?
Aye.
Commissioner Bevel?
Aye.
Commissioner Elms?
Aye.
Okay, motion is approved unanimously. Thank you. All right, we are moving on to the last agenda item of the evening, item number 2C, consideration of a special use permit for the warehouse and distribution facilities on Lot 1R1, Block 1 of the West Industrial Edition, located at 6705 Colleyville Boulevard, case number ZC 18-037.
This is a request for an SUP for 6705 Colleyville Boulevard for warehouse and distribution facilities. The property is owned light manufacturing, and currently all Pro Glass is operating out of this building. Auto Ricambi is the business just to the north there, and they purchased this building and they desire to use the back, about a third of the building before you tonight, as a warehouse distribution facility for their existing business to the north next door. Here's the zoning map. All the properties around it are also zoned light manufacturing. This is located within the Colleyville Boulevard corridor, part of the comprehensive plan. In the SUP language, that this SUP shall apply only to the exhibit in the draft ordinance, as well as some exhibits that we'll talk about here in a second. There'll be no storage of parts or containers that will be allowed outside the building, that the SUP shall expire upon the abandonment of the business, change in the use, a change in ownership, or upon the expiration or termination of the certificate of occupancy. And this is the zoning exhibit here. The building itself is a little over 6,000 square feet, and the applicant is going to occupy about 1,700 square feet. There are 10 parking spaces that are existing, and because the Land Development Code does not prescribe a specific number of spaces for the proposed land use, rather it requires the number be defined as a part of the approved SUP ordinance. So based on the limited number of employees, which I believe to be 6, and the nature of the business, the 10 spaces will meet those needs. There will be new landscaping added to the front of the building where none currently exists today. And here are the elevations. Both facades for both of the buildings are expected to be improved through working with our assistant city manager, he does the economic development work for the city, and the applicant is currently working through that process as well. So they will both be painted and have some front treatments that will add to improve the visual interest for both buildings. And this is currently what the building looks like, 6705. And this is our notification map where we've notified properties located within 500 feet. And staff does recommend approval of this SUP.
Okay, thank you. All right. Is the applicant here? If so, would you like to come forward to provide any additional information?
Hi, I'm Ramsey Gillespie. I live in Grapevine, but I do everything throughout the day in Colleyville.
So if you can provide your Grapevine address?
Sure, 3317 Stonecrest Drive.
Thank you, just for the record.
So we would really like to expand our business. We started in my mom's garage a couple blocks away from here about 10 years ago. Two guys that had a hobby, and it went viral. We're excited to keep growing. It's been good. And we like growing in this community, so we'd like to do that together. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to try to answer anything.
I don't have any questions. We've covered this. I'm not sure if you were sitting here, but we covered this in our work session before. And a lot of the questions that we had were answered by staff. So thank you so much.
I just had one we talked about at the end there, making the improvements to the front of the building. I want to make that part of, not any issues with that.
I mean, between us, close friends, nobody else, that part of Colleyville Boulevard is ugly. And I'd like it to look nicer because I live here. You know, it's going to be hard to make it look beautiful, but we're going to do the best we can. We've got quite a bit of money budgeted for this. We planned on this when we bought the building to make improvements to the visual facade. It needs to look better.
So you're okay with us stipulating in our ordinance?
Absolutely.
That we pass on to council?
Absolutely.
That we have that as a requirement?
Yeah, we're all in for this. You bet.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Okay, I'd like to open the public hearing on this item. Public hearing is open. And I don't have any cards on this item, but if anyone else in the audience would like to come forward and speak on this item, please feel free to do so now. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Public hearing is closed. All right, commissioners, do you have any additional discussions? Well, I guess one of the things that I would like to ask everyone is, well, staff too, maybe, should we provide you with the language that we'd like to see in the ordinance stipulating that the improvements to the building facade be followed through?
So we talked briefly in between our work session and this meeting. My initial thought was that we would just recognize that, or place a stipulation as part of the ordinance itself, that improvements shall be required under the direction of city council and maybe city manager's office and city council. So in that regard, it references that we are expecting the improvements, but not to a detailed level, because I don't know if what we showed you is 100% exact on what they're planning to do. Our assistant city manager might have some changes that he'd like to see. Right. So at least referencing, yes, we want improvements, but we'll leave it up to city council for final.
I'm in agreement with that, because okay. It's not my position to stipulate building materials and all that good stuff, so that's fine.
And I think we might have a model for that language based on the Joe Hudson auto collision that we did a couple of months ago. They're going through the similar process with the facade improvement grant.
Just across the street, yes, that would be great if we can add that in there.
Okay.
That'd be super.
That sounds good.
Okay, that was the main thing that I had concerns with. Anyone else?
I would just like to thank Mr. Gillespie for expanding his business in Colleyville and for your willingness to improve the area with your outside improvements to your buildings. Thank you.
Very good. Okay, if there are no more items to be discussed, I will request a motion on this item. And the case number is case ZC 18-037.
I'll make a motion to approve zoning case ZC 18037.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a second?
Just quickly, do we have to, don't have to say it with?
If you want to add that
Oh, I'm sorry.
the facade agreement.
I was gonna
as
add
agreed
that.
by the
I was
city
gonna add-
manager's office.
Yes, I would like to add that language
Okay,
to include the modifications as desired by or approved by the council and city manager's office.
okay. Okay, very good. So we are voting in,
I'll second it.
excuse me, okay. All right, so we are voting in favor, or voting for case number ZC 18-037 to be approved with the stipulation that the language referencing the improvements to the building facade be made and in accordance with the direction of city council, city staff, and the city manager's office. Commissioner Moore.
Aye.
Commissioner Waltons.
Aye.
Commissioner Holt. Commissioner Mattison votes aye. Commissioner Cook.
Aye.
Commissioner Bevel.
Aye.
Commissioner Elms.
Aye.
It's approved unanimously. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
That's this
It's a
meeting.
very fast meeting.
That was.
You're going to call the roll?